Welcome to KOAM Presents, a podcast produced by KOAM News Now and the 4 States' most watched news team. Welcome back, guys. Episode 4 here today, and meteorologist Sam Lane joins us again. How you doing, Sam? Traveling all over the 4 states.
I know. I've just been on the road a lot here lately, and that's a good thing. Getting out and meeting the folks and the community and talking about my favorite subject, weather.
Yeah, he was at a area middle school this morning, and I feel like it can be a dense subject, but at the same time, it becomes like such a fun thing for kids because like thunder, lightning, and stuff like that.
Right, exactly, and it's something that they can all relate to.
Of course.
Something that everyone can relate to, and so we put together a PowerPoint presentation that we take to various schools, civic groups, fire departments. I know Doug has done a couple of fire departments and police departments, and so it's really great to get out into the community and talk about severe weather and the dangers of severe weather and kind of help kids realize, what they can do to stay safe.
Yeah, that's awesome. And before we get into anything, we have to thank our sponsors, helping
Right.
us make this thing possible. 4statesolar.com, powered by CLX Energy. For any of your solar panel needs, give them a shout out. And you can check out Sticklin and Sticklin at sticklininjurylaw.com and also Atlas Safe Rooms at atlassaferooms.com. So today, I kind of wanted to talk to you about, I saw an article online, to be honest, and it confused me. Talking about droughts, which, we're kind of going through right now, and flooding. Not something you normally think to be paired together, but it really is kind of like cause and effect situation, kind of.
Yeah, well, they're both extremes. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
obviously you have a drought situation where you have an extreme lack of water and then flooding on the opposite. And it seems like, especially here in the plains and in the 4 states in particular, it's either feast or famine.
Oh, yeah.
Last spring we were looking at flooding situation, an excess of rainfall, but then it was like someone walked over to the water spigot and turned it off. And we've been in a drought situation ever since. And hopefully we're going to break out of that now because we're going into a El Nino pattern, which typically is a wetter, warmer pattern for us. But usually El Nino doesn't really start to make its impact known until later on in the fall and winter and the next spring. So right now we're kind of in a transition between La Nina and El Nino, going into an El Nino. And hopefully we're going to start to see a more whatever normal weather is around here.
And so when we get into that transitionary point, if you will, is it something hopefully where we kind of want to taper away from the drought, and
Right.
that's where the issues arise if we don't?
Right, exactly. And we're kind of coming into spring, which is when we get most of our rainfall anyway. So if we don't get it now, we're going to be in a mess of hurt by the time summer rolls around.
Ugh.
And we talked a little bit about this last time about evapotranspiration.
Yeah.
About how green plants and foliage releases water vapor into the atmosphere, and that kind of adds to the dew points and the moisture for the storms to work with. And when you go into a drought situation, how the plants kind of hold off on that and they don't release as much water vapor, which reduces the amount of overall water vapor in the atmosphere, which kind of exacerbates the drought situation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a catch-22. And right now, everything is kind of greening up, and that's good. And we do have several chances of rain coming up. So hopefully we can keep that going because we've got a lot of catching up to do before we go into summer. And I don't want us to go into summer below normal because if we do, like I said, we're going to pay for it.
Oh, man. And so I know you've lived in kind of different regions as far as like weather's concerned. Is us being in, and it's transevaporation, right? Evapotranspiration. I got it all mixed around. So is that at all affected by us being kind of a heavy agricultural area because we have a lot of just like flat crop fields? Is that all playing a factor?
It does play a factor. There's more evapotranspiration that takes place like in southeast Oklahoma, western Arkansas, where there's more forest, more trees, more, that kind of situation and hardwoods and things like that. Here in southeastern Kansas, you're right, we have more farmland, and so there's not a lot of sources for that evapotranspiration to take place, but we do have some. But when it gets really dry in western Oklahoma and western Kansas, it does have an impact on us because, as we talked about before, it allows the dry line to surge further eastward, which has a tendency to shift the tornado threat and the severe weather threat a little bit more eastward. And we've seen that so far this spring. We've not really had that bad of a spring yet. Knock on wood, hopefully that will continue. But as we go into this phase change, we're going to start to see an uptick in our severe weather chances as well as rainfall chances overall. So
Gotcha. And not to be doom and gloom, but like worst case, like could this drought, like does the data seem like it could go further into the summer?
yes, and that's my concern is if we miss out on the next few weeks of precipitation, then if we go into late June and early July really far behind on rainfall again this year, I'm very concerned that July and August will be just absolutely brutal. And we could be looking at water rationing in some communities that have low water supplies. I know we did a story on Caney, Kansas the other day.
Yeah.
Where they were faced with that situation, and now they're having to talk about laying emergency water lines to Lake Copan down in Oklahoma. We could be looking at a very serious drought situation if we do not get caught up on some rainfall in the next few weeks. Hopefully that will take place, but there are some troubling signs to indicate that we may not, and we'll see.
And I feel like that always kind of goes into the story. And like I said, in Caney, for example, like you assess those aquifers and those water sources because that does play a factor.
Yeah.
The groundwater, correct?
Absolutely. And one of the things that affects Oklahoma a lot is most of North Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, they get most of their water supply from southeast Oklahoma.
Really?
Yeah. And so if they don't get enough rain in southeast Oklahoma, that has a tremendous impact on the populations of North Texas, which of course is exploding in growth.
Yeah.
And they're constantly putting water lines up into like Broken Bow and other reservoirs in southeast Oklahoma. So, and prime example, Caney, Kansas is now having to look elsewhere that's relatively close by. Where can we get more additional water resources? And so Lake Copan is one of the sources that they're looking at. Of course, Lake Hula over in northern Osage County might be another option. But it's pretty bad when we're having to start outsourcing and looking for other sources of water because we don't have enough in our own local area.
And this kind of a little is a tangent, but so in that part of Oklahoma, is that man-made or is that actually coming from natural sources? Or do you know? I mean, that's
it's kind of
random,
a mixture of both. They built a lot of dams in the 60s and 70s in southeast Oklahoma. So there's a lot of lakes in southeast Oklahoma as a result of those projects. But, they're not large lakes, but, as the population of North Texas grows, they're taking more and more of those resources away from southern Oklahoma.
Okay. So, and I mean, again, not to be doom and gloom because that is always a likelihood, but with any weather condition,
right.
We look at the severe weather and...
it's kind of like a miniature version of what's going on in the western United States where... Yeah. The Colorado River is constantly low because of the population increase and building all these golf courses in a desert and like Palm Springs and Phoenix and, and people wanting to grow grass in Phoenix, Arizona. So you have this tremendous population growth, but it's also at the same time that there's this mega drought setting in. And so it's leading to all kinds of water resource problems in that area. So we're kind of dealing with that in a miniature way here. Hopefully it's not going to turn anything like what they have out in western United States, but it is something we have to keep an eye on.
Always awareness is half the battle.
That's exactly right.
And we were talking before the recording actually is this, we're in severe weather, which when does it start? What's the first day of
Well,
severe
generally
official?
we like to say around April 15th through June 1st. Those 6 weeks are generally our heightened or peak of severe weather season. But as you know, we can have severe weather any time of year.
Yeah.
But that's generally our peak time.
And we look at, because, we don't see the data, but has it, from your guys' perspective, has it really been that active of a season?
Not really. And a large part of that is because we're stuck in this, what we call an omega block pattern, where you have a ridge of high pressure in the Rocky Mountains, and it prevents any storms from making landfall and coming across the mountains and impacting us. Instead, we've been finding ourselves on the northwestern flow or on the backside of an upper level low that's parked itself over the Great Lakes. Well, generally, a northwesterly wind direction in our area is a dry direction because it cuts off the Gulf of Mexico from coming up and sending moisture our way. So a northwesterly flow pattern is a dry pattern for us. And we've been stuck in this for quite some time, all the way through most of the winter and now into the spring. And we're hoping that this thing breaks, but as of right now, the omega block is still in control.
And so it doesn't seem like that's something that breaks easily. It's a pretty like steadfast.
It's a
pattern
very stable pattern, right? And it's difficult to break out of that pattern. But hopefully, like I said, with El Nino coming on the scene, it will help break that pattern a little bit, because then you start getting more stronger winds in what we call the subtropical jet. So the subtropical jet starts setting up, and that starts increasing in wind speed, and that has a tendency to help break down those ridges and stuff. But we haven't seen that as of yet. So again, like I said, I really am hoping that we get some rainfall in the next few weeks, or we're going to be looking at a very serious drought situation in the summer. Now, in the summer, a northwesterly flow pattern is not necessarily a bad thing as long as the winds are aloft from the northwest aloft.
Okay.
Because then that what sets up what we call a mesoscale convective complex situation,
All right.
where we get thunderstorms that develop just off the lee of the Rockies, and then they roll southeastward in the overnight hours, and that's when we get our summertime thunderstorms that occur like real late at night in the early morning. And those have a tendency to produce quite a bit of rainfall. And so a northwest flow pattern aloft in the summer is actually a good thing for us as far as rainfall, but not so much if our winds are out of the northwest at the surface. That's what we don't want.
Are those late night storms, 'cause it seems like those are typically less severe?
Yes.
And that would obviously be kind of more of a tapered effect.
Exactly.
For kind of the visual people, and I think I'm a very visual person, so like and this might not be the case for something like this, if it does break and, we get the shift, is it like a pendulum where it's like the worst is yet to come, like it's the swing, or is it actually pretty much like a tapered thing?
It does seem like around here we go from one extremity to the next. And so we could, easily break this pattern and go into a very wet pattern. Like I know in the summer of '93, where you had tremendous amounts of flooding on the Missouri River Basin and also the Mississippi River Basin, and it was primarily due to nighttime MCSs, or those mesoscale convective complexes. I don't think we're necessarily seeing that setup coming up, but it could very well be possible that we see something like that, or at least on a smaller scale this summer.
And that sounds promising. I mean, obviously we want that rain, but like it really does seem like it's been a pretty mellow, severe weather season. Which
most of the severe weather has been to the east and southeast of us. We've had a few times where storms developed right on top of us and then became severe in our eastern sections, and then became really nasty and severe the further east they went. And again, this is, we believe, because the drought in western Kansas and western Oklahoma is allowing those systems to migrate further to the east. And as a result, that's what we've seen. Now, looks like we might have a round of severe weather tomorrow in western Oklahoma and in central Oklahoma, and that could be a significant event. And then we'll get the kind of remnants from that, which again, I don't think anyone's going to complain, because we don't want the tornadoes and stuff, but we will take the rainfall that those storms eventually congeal into.
Oh, yeah.
And as they roll across our area. So we're actually expecting maybe a couple of inches of rain in this next event. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll happen.
And for you listening, so we're recording on a Wednesday, and we release it tomorrow on Thursday. So really, it would be tonight, I guess, for
Right.
the people listening, or whenever you listen, the May 4th, if you will. And may the 4th be with you, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, today is actually the 24th anniversary of the worst tornado outbreak in Oklahoma history, May 3rd of 99. That was the first time a tornado emergency was ever issued when the tornado struck Moore, Oklahoma. And I was the chief meteorologist at the Fox station in Tulsa at the time, and I remember standing in the master control room watching the video coming in on the satellite from what was going on down in Oklahoma City and just feeling so utterly hopeless because I'm looking at what's going on and I know in my heart of hearts that there are people dying and there's not a thing I can do about it. And it was a very, very eye-opening and very one of those days you just don't forget.
Oh, I mean, I can't imagine. And I honestly, I am somewhat unfamiliar with, because I grew up in kind of the northern part of Kansas and Kansas City. So it was the most deadly, or is it the biggest from what size was it?
The number of tornadoes.
Oh,
it was the
okay.
most tornadoes Oklahoma ever had in one day.
Oh, wow.
And it was also, there were numerous F4 tornadoes, and there was, of course, the big F5 that hit Moore. Mm-hmm. And because the National Weather Service was actually able to see the video on their TV screens in the Weather Service office before the tornado struck Moore and the Oklahoma City metro area, is what prompted them to issue a tornado warning with the wording tornado emergency.
Wow.
Which is the first time that had ever been used. I mean, they created it on the fly. They're like, we're going to issue a tornado warning, but how can we make it more emphatic in our wording? And they're like, so they just came up with, well, let's call it a tornado emergency. And so that's what they did. And it's been used sparingly since then, but that was the first time that wording had ever been used. So we have, of course, tornado watches, tornado warnings, and now we have tornado emergency. And that's reserved for these large, like Joplin in the tornado that happened here in 2011. That was a tornado emergency. So we reserve those type of warnings for when we have large maxi tornadoes going through a very populated area.
Yeah, it's like an active threat, essentially.
Absolutely.
It's like right there.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just duck
Not
for
radar
cover.
indicated, not possible tornado or anything. This is a tornado emergency, meaning we have a large, destructive, killer tornado moving through the metropolitan area.
Wow.
And so it's worded in a much more strongly, in a much strong way to get people to take action.
We have about 20 staff members in our businesses.
I have a daycare, and so I'm responsible for 20 other families' children.
It really hit home that we really need to have a storm shelter.
We needed the security. With the way the weather's been in the last few years, really made us nervous.
To me, it means I have a safe place in my house.
This has given us more peace of mind every time we see a storm roll.
I don't worry now. I feel safe.
I trust my life with it.
Own your power. Four State Solar, powered by CLX Energy, can help you take control of the power in your home using solar energy. By booking an appointment at fourstatesolar.com, you'll receive a personalized recommendation based on your energy needs. We offer top quality products, plus professional installation and warranties by a leader in the industry. And you receive $25 for completing an appointment. Visit fourstatesolar.com and schedule an appointment today. It's time to own your power.
Hi, I'm Charlie Sticklin.
And I'm Sarah Sticklin McDonald with the Sticklin & Sticklin Law Firm.
And I'm Mizzou basketball's Trey Gomillion.
From the basketball court
To the courtroom.
Trust in a winning team.
At Sticklin & Sticklin, our only focus is personal injury.
we've earned millions
And millions.
for our clients since 1991.
So whether your case is worth thousands,
Or go millions.
Sticklin & Sticklin is the firm for you.
Sticklin' to Sticklin. It's a slam dunk.
Yeah, and for you to be a meteorologist down there, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, I feel like, I don't know how the exact number of how many tornadoes, do you know, happened by chance?
It's been 24 years, so it's
been
kind
a
of
long-
hard to remember. I
Yeah.
want to say there were 70 maybe tornadoes that night. don't quote me on
yeah.
that, but there were a lot.
Which, we won't quote you, obviously, but like just for you in that situation, I know like you said, you're talking about sitting or standing back in mass control, looking at the screen. Where does your head go at as far as like prioritizing? You see the big one and more. You're like, oh, like there's obviously going to be devastation, but you still have numerous of surrounding. Where does your head go at? Like, what should I look for?
Well, we knew that those storms were headed towards Tulsa. And so my viewing area started halfway between Tulsa and Oklahoma City around Stroud. And so I became very acutely aware of what the storms were doing as they got closer and closer to my viewing area. And so just before it entered my viewing area, I started going on the air immediately, emphatically telling people, these are the same cells that have produced all the maxi devastating, deadly tornadoes in Oklahoma City. They're now moving into Creek County, Lincoln County, and you need to take these seriously. And of course, Stroud was hit by one of the tornadoes. And then what really concerned us, as it was coming into the west side of Tulsa, we had been getting reports of continuous touchdowns through Creek County. And then we were on the 5th floor of the Fox Plaza there on 51st and Yale. And the western side of the building, I could see towards West Tulsa. And so I had just done a cut-in, and I went into master control, and I looked out the west window, and I could see power flashes.
Oh, jeez.
And I immediately knew, oh my gosh, this thing is on the ground again. So I immediately went back into the studio, threw on the microphone, said, come to me, come to me, come to me. And they went to me, and that's when I was telling people this tornado was on the ground doing damage in West Tulsa. And of course, if it continues to stay on the ground, it was going to go right across the heart of Tulsa. Well, fortunately, it hit the area called, trying to think of the name of the west side of Tulsa that it hit. I can't remember right now, but it hit in that area. And then when it got closer to the Arkansas River, it dissipated and it didn't actually stay on the ground. And so there was no threat for but we were very close to having a large tornado go across the heart of Tulsa that night, duplicating what had happened in Moore earlier that evening. And fortunately, that did not happen. But yes, seeing the video from earlier in the evening made us extremely conscientious about what was happening and what we needed to tell people was out there, or with the potential anyway.
Well, and too, there has to be some level of self-interest of like, how close does it get to your station?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Tulsa, but like, I mean, it seems like that was pretty, like you have to start thinking, what are we going to do if it's getting close, or like situations like that?
It hit a large church there on the west side of Tulsa, and a few other shopping centers and things like that. Now, fortunately, by this time it had gotten, and the other thing that really concerned us was it was now dark. And nighttime tornadoes are the ones that scare meteorologists the most, because people have a tendency, especially in this part of the world, when a tornado warning is issued for their area, unfortunately, they, instead of taking shelter immediately, they want to go and see it for themselves. So they will go out and they will verify. And social scientists have done research on this, that people, when they're given a warning about something, they want confirmation. And so they start seeking out other sources to get that innate need that we have to, is this really happening? Is it?
Yeah.
And so, and at nighttime, obviously you're not going to see it. And so when we need people to take action immediately, the last thing we need them to do is be going out and looking, trying to find it. And so it's one of those things that we really worry about, especially meteorologists in the southeastern United States, because they not only have the problem of nighttime tornadoes have a tendency to occur there a lot, but also lots of tall pine trees blocking the view. And so you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
And also that part of the country has a large amount of population that live in mobile homes.
Oh, yep.
And so you combine all of these factors together, it just spells disaster in that part of the world. But in this part of the country, we also have a lot of people that live in modular homes or mobile homes. And so it's one of those things that we as meteorologists are very acutely aware of, and that's why we try to give as much forewarning as possible. And so I advise people that when a tornado watch is issued and you live in a mobile home, you need to be thinking immediately, where do I need to go and hang out until this threat is over?
You can watch from a safe place.
Right, because if you wait until you're under the warning, it's too late.
Yeah.
You should have already been in your place of safety before then. Now, we try to give us 15, 20 minutes heads up, which can give you enough time to go to the neighbor's house or, get in your car and go to a sturdier shelter. But really, people in modular homes and mobile homes, they need to be thinking about these things when a watch is issued. And then when the warning is issued, you're in a better place already. But we still need you to take action.
So from a scientific standpoint, as far as predicting, the path of these tornadoes, does night and day make a difference for you guys as far as does it become harder to track at night, or it's all pretty much the same? It's literally just people's safety.
Exactly. It's people's awareness and perception that we struggle with more in a nighttime scenario than in a daytime scenario. We have some new computer models that are coming out. One of them is a mesoscale model called the HRRR. It's a HRRR. And we just call it the HRRR. It makes it a lot easier. And that model spits out a product that allows us to forecast updraft helicity swaths. And I have to admit, this model is really, really good. And we're hoping that as this model continues to be developed and fine-tuned, there may come a point where we can maybe predict the paths of tornadoes hours in advance with this particular model. I'm not saying that we're there yet.
Yeah.
But for example, the tornado that hit Wynne, Arkansas not too long ago, about a month or so ago. Yeah. The HRRR model that morning predicted a supercell with an updraft helicity swath going right over that area, from Little Rock to Wynne to just north of Memphis, right into western Tennessee to Covington, Tennessee. I mean, it just nailed it.
Wow.
And I'm like, now, it doesn't necessarily do that on all storms and every storm, but for that model to be able to do that far in advance, that's making some serious progress. But then there's also been a lot of research done on, it seems like the more advanced warning people are given, the more the opposite reaction that we want takes place. They have a tendency to not take action. So it's like if you give people beyond 30 minutes warning about something, they start taking more of a lackadaisical attitude towards it.
I could totally see that. I mean, just even for myself personally, if I hear even these warnings, whenever I get up for work in the morning, 7, 8 a.m., I'm just like, oh, that's probably in the evening. I have most of the day. So it's so funny how you kind of have to leverage this technology just to think about how people, because like you said, the HRRR, just for kind of layman's terms, is more specific for supercells, correct?
Yes.
So, it's how much of this technology do you want to put out there if it's not getting utilized by the general? But I mean, that is an ultimate question. How do you change their perspective?
Exactly. And I think that's why I'm excited over the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, especially after the 2011 tornado outbreak sequence, really caused us meteorologists to stop and take a step back and go, what are we doing wrong? How come is it in 2011 we have over 200 people killed in a tornado outbreak when we have all this education, we have all this technology, we have all these radars? What are we doing wrong? And what we discovered after researching and investigating and interviewing countless survivors and people, we started involving social sciences and sociologists and psychologists into the warning process. What do we have to do to make people act and act decisively in a timely manner?
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of helped us figure out can we do this better. We've even started looking at, can we make the graphics a different color? Because some people respond differently to different colors.
Yeah.
Some people are colorblind. And in fact, we had a meeting not too long ago for the entire weather department of not only our station, but all the stations in the Morgan Murphy media empire about how can we make our graphics more simple, easy to understand, and digestible for people? And we've been looking at different size fonts, different colors, different graphics. Do we add more? Do we take away things? So we're constantly trying to figure out ways to make meteorology more understandable, but at the same time, more actionable information for people to stay safe. And that's what we're trying to do, especially when it comes to a tornado situation or even a hurricane situation. We discovered after hurricanes, and this shocked me, but I guess it shouldn't have, but do you know what the number one reason why people would not evacuate their homes when they were being advised to do so was?
During a hurricane? I have no idea.
Their pets.
Right.
They didn't want to leave their pets. And as meteorologists, we're looking at going, when we see a Category 5 or a Category 4 hurricane getting ready to come on shore, to us, it's like, get out of Dodge, right? Yeah. But to most people, they're like, but what about Fido? What about, what about Spot? What about, and so when we discovered that, we're like, holy cow, we need to rethink the evacuation process. So what we started doing and what we started implementing, or at least when I was in Florida, was, and I don't know if this was done in a legislative way or if it was done through peer pressure or whatever, but there was a lot of pressure put towards animal shelters to accepting people's pets to allow them to evacuate so that they could take their pets to a dog shelter or an animal shelter until the threat had passed. And then they would be able to retrieve their animals afterwards. Or if we were advising people to evacuate to Red Cross shelters, the Red Cross started offering shelters that would take pets, but they had to be in a cage. And so a lot of people they're like, yeah, I'll evacuate if I can bring my pet. Wow. And so it's these kind of things that we as meteorologists, we're not even thinking of in those terms. But then when we started asking people and doing all this research and focus groups, we discovered that the number one reason why people weren't evacuating was because they couldn't take their pets.
And it's such like a nuanced thing. And you read my mind, because I was going to ask you is like, if that's something, I don't want to put words in Doug or Chris's mouth, but like you guys kind of have to have in the back of your head, like, okay, how do I want to word this where, one, I don't scare them.
Right.
But two, you got to put a little fire. Because, the Midwest, and that's something with Morgan Murphy, who's our parent company, have stations on the West Coast and the northern Midwest.
And Victoria, Texas, on the Gulf Coast.
Texas, on the Gulf Coast. So, they have different audiences who get different weather. So, and they're not built like Midwesterners who like to go out and watch the storms.
It's kind of a funny story, but not in a way. I met the director of the National Hurricane Center years ago, and he was actually from Oklahoma, believe it or not. And he was telling me that one time there were sheriff's offices going door to door advising people to evacuate from a particular hurricane. And when they were said, no, we're going to stay, he goes, okay. And he would carry around a magic marker. And he would give the magic marker to the person that opened and answered the door. And if they said that they know that they weren't going to evacuate, he said, well, I need you to take this permanent marker and put your Social Security number on your forearm.
Oh, my God.
That is just brutal. When that happened, it convinced a lot of people, oh, my God, they're really serious. Wow. We need to get out of town. And so whatever it takes to get people to take action, and this is one of the ways that he come up with. He's like, okay, fine. You don't want to evacuate? Then could you please make my job easier so that when we find your body, your Social Security number will have a permanent marker on your forearm so that we know how to identify you?
Wow. And first off, that is just savage.
Yeah.
But and it harkens back, because I'm sure there's viewers out there that, they're like, oh, we talk about the safety. And I think we talk about with Chris, and maybe in previous episodes of ours, talk about safety all the time. And personally, me, I have, the pet thing is really funny. I have 3 dogs, and I would do anything for those dogs.
Me too. I've got a cat that I would do anything for. I live with him.
Well, yeah. And you think about we have to, my girlfriend and I, we put that into our plan. You know, what are we going to
Right.
do with our pets? You know, in the event, obviously we don't have hurricanes, but tornadoes, you know, get the leashes, get the dog
That's
food,
right.
whatever. And, you know, have them, you can incorporate them into your plan so it doesn't become a hindrance. Cause like we talk about too with the safety and the repetition and all
Mm-hmm.
that, it's like, it has to be just like a knee jerk. Like you got to be
Right.
ready. Cause if you are going to wait around to the last minute and stare out at your front yard,
Right.
Um,
And I'm glad you bring up the plan part, because one of the things that I did today at the school, and this is something that's relatively new that we've been encouraging people to do when we go to speak at various groups, is it's not enough to go seek shelter in a basement, bathroom, hallway, or closet, which is what we tell people to do. But again, because we started delving deeper into the science, we discovered, and this was where the medical community got involved,
okay.
that most fatalities from tornadoes are as a direct result of injuries to the head. And so we started, well, how can we mitigate that? One of the ways that we do that is we encourage people now to take helmets. If you've got a football helmet, a bicycle helmet, any kind of helmet,
Wow.
make sure that you've got helmets in your bathroom or wherever you take shelter, so that when it comes time to take shelter, you put on that helmet. And one of the things that I did today was I took a pencil off the desk and I threw it at a girl, and I said, I'm going to take this pencil and I'm going to throw it at this girl. And I threw it at her and it hit her and everyone laughed. I said, yeah, it didn't hurt, right? But what if I was to take that same pencil and throw it at her at 200 miles per hour?
Oh my God.
And what if I take that pencil and throw it at her at 200 miles per hour and it hits her in the head? She's a goner.
Yeah.
And so it drives home the point that you can take a blow to the arm, the leg, the torso, and you can sustain injuries that way. And yes, it'll be bad and it's traumatic, but there's a good chance that you could survive that. But if I take, let's say, my pair of glasses and I throw it at your head at 200 miles an hour, like in an F4, F5 tornado, and it hits you in your head, you're gone.
Yeah.
So anything that we can do to protect our head. So now we encourage people to make sure in your plan that you have a place for your pets and you have helmets in place to protect your head from any flying debris. Now, a lot of people will wrap their themselves in mattresses or whatever, which is good too, but helmets seem to be a much quicker and easier thing to do than grabbing a mattress off the bed. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean again, that's so weird because it seems so obvious now, but I never thought of that. I mean, we have little like what we call like go bags, not like apocalypse, but just safety, kind of some stuff, bandages, stuff like that.
Right.
We get them ready every spring and we have them
Right.
close, whatever. But it's just things like that I never even thought of, but of course that makes total sense.
Right, and also making sure that you have a good pair of shoes. You don't want to be seeking shelter in flip-flops because, after, God forbid, your house does get hit, now you've got boards, nails, electrical wires, everything laying everywhere, and you're in flip-flops if they're still on your feet.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just, like you said, we think about these things now as, oh, that's common sense. Well, but we need to think about these things ahead of time. It's important to be ahead of the storm and not wait to the last minute. But of course, we are psychological and sociological beings, and we have a tendency to just wait to the last possible minute. But if you do that, then you're asking for possible trouble. Just like, they encourage us to do fire drills and things like that, and making sure that, your windows are not blocked and fire exits aren't blocked and things like that. It's because in a crisis and an emergency situation, you don't have time to be dealing with all that stuff.
Yeah. And I would hope that it is more comforting to viewers and listeners to know that it's not just like a bunch of weather scientists who are talking,
Right.
you're getting sociologists involved, you're getting medical professionals.
Right.
It's like polling all of these things because ultimately it is people's lives that you're trying to save and
Right.
try to understand, and in vastly different parts of the world,
Right.
people, different states behave differently.
Exactly. And as we see the climate changing and becoming more violent, and as our population area increases and as we continue to spread out, you increase the risk. You increase the chances of more fatalities and casualties because you're exposing a larger population to more severe weather.
Yeah.
And so that's why we want to try to keep that death toll trend going downward
Oh, of course.
instead of going the opposite direction, which, like I said, 2011 was kind of a wake-up call to us to say, okay, radar is only doing so much. What can we do different? And I hope that through programs like this and through educating the public and going out and speaking to schools and things like that, and of course we had our tornado special that aired not too long ago, talking about these things and letting people know what they can do to lessen or reduce their risk is a very good thing.
And to kind of take it full circle, you talked about how certain areas, depending on where that front is, I would not have anticipated, had you asked, just a common person like me, that Arkansas and like eastern part of Missouri, I feel like they've just gotten rocked this year.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one of those things like, how can us average people, you can't really anticipate those things unless you're just ready.
Right.
But yeah, all that to say, they're looking out for you.
24/7, 365.
24/7, and to watch our newscasts so you stay informed. Check them out on Facebook, everything like that. Sam, always thank you.
You're welcome.
We're not even done yet. We got a few more episodes left. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, go check those out. There's a lot of great information on there. Obviously, again, a huge thank you to our sponsors, Atlas Safe Rooms, for any secure safe rooms, weather storms.
Absolutely.
Check out their website, atlassaferooms.com. Stickland and Stickland Law Firm. You can check them out at sticklandinjurylaw.com for anything auto injury, anything with your lawyer needs. You can contact them. And lastly, ForStateSolar.com, powered by CLX Energy, are a great solar panel consultation for you. Go check out their website today. So with that, I'll leave you and catch you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to KOAM Presents. For the latest content and local news, weather, and sports, please go to KOAMNewsNow.com.